the class. Okay, I guess we're recording now. All right, good afternoon, everyone. Maybe more people will show up as we get started here. I'm Gorman Lee. I'm the K-12 Director of Social Studies for the Braintree Public Schools. I'm putting on my Mass Council for the Social Studies hat. And welcome to our virtual Social Studies conference. We have Raphael Walde. Did I pronounce it correctly? From Population Education. He's going to be presenting lessons from the census. So without further ado, welcome. Thank you for presenting.
Thank you, Gorman, and thank you to the conference for having population education again. So my name is Raphael Waldeb. I am calling in from just a bit further south than where I think most folks here are calling in from Washington, D.C. And I am here on behalf of Population Education. So I'm going to share just a little bit about our organization and just give folks some context for the lens in which we are writing and sort of presenting our lesson plans and teaching resources through. And then we'll spend the majority of our time together today just demonstrating some of the lesson plans that we have that are in some way, shape, or form connected to the census. We have a boatload of lessons that incorporate the census in some way, shape, or form. We'll be able to highlight several of those today. So that'll be very relevant for our social studies educators in middle school and in high school. So I'm going to go ahead and I have the screen share up already. So we'll just move along through our slides here. So Population Education, we were founded in 1975, and we're actually a program, a 501c3 under a larger organization called Population Connection. Our sort of arm here is strictly education based, and our primary mission is sort of twofold. So we create K through 12 lesson plans and teaching resources for educators that want to cover population topics in the classroom, and I'll explain more specifically what population topics are in a moment here. But essentially anything and everything that relates to the human population. The second piece to our mission is that we are sort of facilitating professional development workshops all across the nation, even into other countries where we have specific partners as well. So super excited to work with pre-service and in-service educators. Just FYI, if you like what you're seeing here today and you're interested in bringing us in for your specific school or your district at large, and you think your representative within your district who organizes PDs might find us interesting, feel free to send our name to them. We're happy to partner with whomever, wherever. So a little bit about population education, or specifically population topics. We have these sort of two major buckets in which we are looking at population topics. There's this environmental bucket and there's the societal bucket. So you'll see lessons that incorporate issues that relate to resource use and deforestation. We're thinking about ecosystems and wildlife. We're thinking about water consumption, how we grow our food, energy consumption, how we produce energy, and how that impacts our planet, how population growth connects with these issues as well, how population dynamics sort of intersect with these issues. And then we're also on the societal level thinking about sort of population trends, especially sort of this recent trend that we're noticing over the last several generations, thinking about urbanization and how that's increasing. We're thinking about public health, which is very relevant today. Birth rates and death rates are absolutely tied into population topics, and you'll see examples of some population pyramids today, actually. We're thinking about human rights and civil rights, and also access to education. So we find that all of these content areas connect very well with population and are very relevant to science classes, social studies classes, math classes, language arts, through middle school, high school, early childhood, into elementary as well. So we're sort of K through 12 as a whole. Today, we are going to distribute some resources to you all because you tuned in today, so well done to you. You are going to receive 2 of these resources. So the resource on the left is our new 330 million in the USA kit. So it's 14 lesson plans, there's 6 student readings, there's infographics as well. And this is going to be great for grades 6 through 12. So if you're an educator covering any kind of social studies course within 6 through 12, this is going to be an awesome resource for you. So specifically, I think this sort of hits the nail on the head for standards that are connected to US history, AP US history, human geography, AP human geography, government, just sort of to name a few. So you'll receive access to this today, and then also our K through 12 best of curriculum. So the resources that I'm going to share with you all are going to be on either one of these curriculum access cards. And these are essentially access cards in the form of a PDF, and it'll give you access to our website that houses all of these documents. So you can easily just print off those PDFs, or you can keep it digital, whatever you prefer. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and move us through our first lesson, or I guess teaching resource for today. So we love to open up with this video. This is our world population dot video. It's about a 5-minute video. It's one of our most popular resources, and it sort of incorporates both history and geography, just to keep it relevant to social studies here today. It's a 5-minute video, and it'll essentially take students through a timeline from the year 1 CE through until actually a projection into the future, so until 2050. And we're going to see population dots pop up on our world map here. Each one of the yellow dots that you're going to see on the screen represents a population concentration of 1 million people or more. So, you know, as you show this video to your students, it's just important to remind folks that, you know, this is based on UN data. It absolutely is not capturing every single person on the planet, but it's sort of a rough estimate for how we've seen population grow throughout the world from 1 CE through until 2050. There's also going to be some historical facts at the bottom of the screen. And those sort of historical moments will pop up, and that'll be relevant to how human population is impacted as well. So you can find this on one of our websites. It's not our home website, but it's a website that we've built out for this particular resource called worldpopulationhistory.org. So when you go to worldpopulationhistory.org, you'll have this pop-up that shows up, and there's an explore the map option, which is basically an interactive map that's in the background here. That is an interactive version of the video. There's the video itself, and then there are lesson plans that are free and available to download that are relevant to high school, that incorporate the video or the map in some way, shape, or form. So I'm going to show you all the video just so you can get a sense for the context in which we look at a lot of our lessons through. This is going to be great for any students that are in upper elementary, into middle school, and into high school as well. So it's sort of an easy resource that you can branch any sort of content area off of. All right, actually, let me make sure I shared my sound here. Give me 1 second. There you go. I'll do some light narration in the background as well, just to give you all some context.
An environment is a system of living things. The earth is our environment. The capacity of our environment to provide space, to produce food, and to supply energy are all limited. Humans thrive on less than 17% of the Earth's surface, and only about 4% will grow crops. We depend on these limited resources for our survival, yet we are increasing our population as if they were infinite. This fact is at the core of our environmental problems. On this map, we'll show population growth from the year 1 CE to the present, and project our growth into the year 2050. Population concentrations will be indicated by dots, each of which will represent 1 million people. In areas where people are spread out and don't live in concentrations of 1 million, dots are placed in the middle of their approximate range. Historical references will be provided by images and text at the bottom of the screen.
All right, so we start in the year 1 CE, and of course that's not the beginning of time, so we already have human beings on the planet here. And it's really interesting to see sort of where we're seeing both population distribution and concentration, how that's relevant to geography. Like what about, where we're seeing people is connected to resource availability, is connected to climate, is connected to geography, is connected to sort of civilization and society and sort of technological advances. These are all conversations we can sort of have connections to with our students, depending on what kind of content has already been covered or what kind of content you want to cover after this video. But I'd like to highlight, asking students, where are you seeing population so far? Where are you seeing population distribution or concentrations of population? What are these modern day countries? What about those particular regions allows for human beings to thrive, right? So students will notice that amongst several sort of modern day Asian countries, specifically India, specifically China, we're seeing that there are large population concentrations, and this is typically fertile land. There's lots of agriculture that existed here for civilizations in many generations, and so we're seeing that in that year 1 CE and beyond, population has thrived here. Just to highlight a geography component here, along the Nile River in Northeast Africa, we're also seeing population along that river. And so we can see how geography impacts where humans settle and where humans tend to live. We're also noticing that, along the Sahara Desert, in northern sort of modern day Russia here, even in Australia, we're not necessarily seeing a lot of people, a lot of population yet. And that might have to do with the geography of those regions. And we can talk to students about that. We want to bring in some history. In 1300 CE, the Black Plague really impacts European populations. So we saw a lot of dots fall off the map there. It's actually about 70 million people, so 1/5 of the world's population at that time. And we can highlight that for students and how, thinking about the concentration of population, when folks are living in cities, it's a lot easier for disease to spread. We see that impacting Europe more specifically, even though populations across the trade channels from Asia into Europe were impacted by the Black Plague. So just an interesting sort of historical event you can highlight for students. And then in the year 1800, it's really when we start to see a shift in the speed and the frequency in which population grows after the Industrial Revolution. So this is when your students will notice a shift. All right, so I'm going to pause it there. There's a little bit of an outro narration as well, but you don't necessarily need to cover that. You can always just pause it at various points in the video. I like to pause it at the end here and just talk to students, give them an opportunity to consider, what they're noticing, what stood out to you, any questions that you might have, where you're seeing population concentrations in this projection of 2050. Where we're not seeing a lot of population and why that might be the case. I think it's, a lot of potential jump off points here. Do folks in the room today have any questions on anything you've seen related to this video? I know it's sort of a brief overview, but we like to sort of highlight it as an easy sort of jump off point to bring in other topics. All right, cool. The interactive map that I talked about. You can access it just by going to the menu here and going to explore the map and timeline. And just very briefly, I'll highlight for you all that the interactive map has the timeline here at the bottom. There are little sort of diamonds here that you're noticing, as well as some colors along the timeline. Each of these colors represents a specific theme of milestone that'll pop up. So for example, let's say we're moving through the timeline here, which I can drag. Let's stop at 800 CE. There's a people and society theme. There's an environmental theme that has a milestone that's popping up here. So we're seeing, you know, 800 CE related to the people and society theme, which is going to be relevant for our social studies folks in particular. You know, we have this moment in time, the decline of the Mayan civilization, and sort of a historical fact there. And this milestone will actually pop up on the map as well. So I believe it's this milestone here. So we have a sort of a location to mark that milestone as well. Each one of these dots on the map is going to be a concentration of 1 million people or more, just like we saw in the video. And then there are also overlays that we can play around with. So there's human land use, CO2 emissions, fertility rates, urbanization, life expectancy. Let's say we're thinking about urbanization. So that range is 1960 to 2050. And our timeline sort of jumped to 1960 here. But if we hit play, or you can drag yourself, we'll sort of see how this chloropleth map pops up here and how it indicates urbanization trends as we move through time. So just sort of a fun tool that you can use in your classrooms. We have lessons that incorporate different components of this interactive map. So it might ask students to you know, conduct a part of the lessons procedure by engaging with this map, you know, in small groups or individually or as a whole class. So just FYI for you, in case you find a lesson that you enjoy that brings this map into play. All right. So if there are no questions, feel free to drop questions in the chat box as well. I'll move us through to our next resource. And this resource is called, this is actually a lesson plan that's called Mysteries of the US Pyramids. And this is going to bring in population pyramids that use US Census data from various periods in US history. So it's going to be great for the 6 through 12 classroom, great for US history, APUSH, government, AP Human Geography. And students essentially will be constructing population pyramids to represent US population during different points in US history. So the lesson starts out with a little bit of a explainer on population pyramids, in case this is the first time that your students are sort of seeing what population pyramids are. Are folks familiar with in this room with population pyramids in some way? Cool. So, you know, we can talk to students about the sort of the sex breakdown, and that's based off of what we see on the census. So we have the population pyramid, which shows us that you know, there's sort of cohorts that are split up by age cohort, and then we have the different sides of the pyramid split up by sex. And you know, you can sort of talk students through that. It seems like folks in the room here know what a population pyramid is, so I won't take up a ton of time on that. We can ask some discussion questions that are in the lesson plan as well, that sort of test students' knowledge in sort of what they're taking in real time in the class. So some of these questions include, you know, what's the largest cohort and how can you tell, and sort of having students try to figure that out. And it's going to be, as we can see here, it's going to be the 0 to 4 cohort. And then if we're looking specifically between sex, the 4 marker has a bar that's a bit further out than it does on this side. So our largest cohort is going to be the 0 to 4 male. We can ask students where they are represented on the pyramid. just to sort of bring it home a little bit and see if they can identify where they are at. And then is this population growing or shrinking? How can you tell? And testing students' knowledge there as well. As we can see, the younger we go, the more people there are, or larger percentage of the total population there is, and therefore the population is growing. Next, what we'll do is we have 6 different spreadsheets. Each one of those spreadsheets is sort of a section of data from the US Census during a particular time. So in 1880, we have US Census data. We have US Census, sorry. So we have US Census data from 1880, 1920, 1960, 2000, 2020, and 2050. So 6 different periods. 2050 is a projection into the future based on the demographic data that is a projection into the future that we have available. And students are going to be creating their own population pyramids using the census data. So they can do that in person. If you're in an in-person classroom, they can do that virtually. If they are in a hybrid or virtual classroom, I'll show you the virtual version since we're virtual today. It uses our digital tool that we've created through Google Sheets. So what I can actually do here is copy this and paste it in the chat box as well, so you all can play around with this. I'll also play around with it on the screen share in case you can't access it. And students are, you can split students up into 6 different groups. You can make multiple copies of this spreadsheet, and depending on the size of your classroom. Essentially, you want a number of students to work on building a population pyramid for each of the 6 different data census data sort of packets that we have. So, for example, the tab to the bottom of the screen here at the bottom of the spreadsheet have the different census sections split up here. And I have the screen share open, right? I do. Great. So the population data is already included here on this spreadsheet, but you can easily just clear this information if you want your students to calculate it themselves. And the student worksheet allows students to calculate these population pyramid percentages based off of the total number of people in that age cohort, and that's in thousands, I believe. By, or is it, no, I'm getting my place wrong, but essentially students are going to be calculating the total, or the number within that cohort by dividing that by the total number, and then that's going to give us the percentage of people that are represented in this particular age cohort for the total population. So if you want to make it easy for your students, you can just give them the spreadsheet that already has the information plugged in here. So I'm just going to build a couple of these cohorts here, just so you can get a sense for what this looks like. Students can use their own colors to represent the different sides of the pyramid here. We just have red and blue here, red for female, blue for male. So our 0 to 4 cohort is already built for us here. So we're going to move to the 5 through 9. And we have 6.5% of the total population is 5 through 9 males. And so we'll go to the male side. And you'll notice that the spreadsheet is, we'll need to round up a little bit because we have it as like a 6.2, 6.4, 6.6, 6.8, and then the whole number there. It's split up into 5 different units. So we'll round up and we'll say that this is about 6.6. We'll pick a color. We can stick with this blue here. And then we'll do the same thing on this side. So students will find that 6.4. I'm doing that incorrectly, actually. It's going to be there. And did I get that red? I didn't get the red right. That's okay. but you all get the idea. So students are essentially going to be building 6 different population pyramids. Each group is going to be sort of doing a deep dive into their own pyramids. They're not going to be seeing what the other pyramids look like. And it looks like we have another guest. Hi, Allison. Thanks for joining today. We're covering a lesson on population pyramids. So this is our lesson called Mysteries of the US Pyramids. And once students have had a chance to build each of these population pyramids, then we're going to compare and contrast. And there's some really great discussion questions in the lesson plan that are going to support students through some of that learning. So students are going to discuss the following. And just so you all can see here, this is what all 6 population pyramids look like. So we have an answer key that's provided to you all as instructors, and students can check their work as well. So we have the 1880 US population pyramid on the top left-hand corner. Next to it is the 1920. Then we have 1960. Then we have 2000, 2020, and 2050. Now, what's really cool about this is, each pyramid looks different and it's telling it a different story, right? And the discussion questions allow students to explore what these population pyramids are telling us about human history. And we can see how historical moments in time are impacting the US population. And this is also the case, of course, for any country around the world. So we actually have another lesson that's just called A Power of the Pyramids. And that's going to be available to you all through the curriculum that you're going to have access to. And that lesson compares different countries' data, sort of like a global comparison rather than just specifically the United States. So some sample discussion questions here for you. So which graph looks most like a pyramid? Which graph looks most like a rectangle? And what does it mean? So talking to students about what they're noticing here, right? 1880 is most like a pyramid. Looks like maybe 2020 or 2050 is most like a rectangle. And why might that be the case, right? In 1880, we're seeing that there is rapid population growth. And as a result, the oldest folks I should probably say the youngest folks outweighing the oldest folks in the in the US population. And that's evident by how much of the percentage of each cohort takes up the total population percentage, right? Which is sort of inverse when we compare to this 2020 or 2050 pyramid, where we're seeing population a bit more stagnant, let's say. Even sort of declining a bit if you look at some of these bumps here, which we'll actually get into in the next discussion question. So we can ask students, and each population pyramid has its own unique discussion questions that you can highlight depending on the different period and time you want to cover. So looking at the graph for 1960, there's an obvious indentation in the pyramid's shape. Why might that be the case? So we can ask students to look at this 1960 population pyramid, which I actually have up on the screen here for you all. I guess I might have spoiled it with that next discussion question. I was going to ask you oh, maybe you can still answer it. So looking at the graph for 1960, there's an obvious indentation in the pyramid's shape. So this indentation around the 20 to 24 and 25 to 29 age cohort. What happened during this period that impacted the US population? Any guesses from folks in the room?
Vietnam War.
Close. So right. So it's absolutely a result of war, but we're actually going to go back a little bit further. So 1960. This is the snapshot for 1960, right? So if we're going back about 20 years, so that's when these age cohorts were born. There was a particular significant event in U.S. history around that 1940.
World War II.
Yes, exactly. And your students might suggest a different historical moment that maybe impacted the population pyramid at some other point. And that's okay, right? That discussion is important for students, and they can use the clues that are available with the pyramid to do some of that guessing. So we just did a little bit of deduction there by looking at that 1960. And then, okay, if we're looking at this age cohort, when were they born? What was happening during that time? So we had the indentation is for the men and women between ages 20 to 24 and 25 to 29. And these were the children that were born pre-World War II. So we're thinking specifically around the Great Depression. So following the stock market crash of 1929, there was a decade of historically high rates of unemployment and poverty in the United States. And during economic depression, we typically see that couples tend to have fewer children. And so as a result, that's actually visible in the population pyramid, which is really interesting. Whereas if you go back a few more years, or I guess if you move forward a few more years into these 3 age cohorts at the bottom, which are the largest in our entire population pyramid at this time, this represents our youngest members of society, right? And these were children that were born during the economic prosperity post-World War II. The 1945 to 1960 sort of period, aka as Carrie said in the chat there, our baby boom generation. So it's really interesting that we can see sort of that baby boom occur as a result of a historical moment in time, right? And then we can talk to students about, okay, let's say we're in 1960 and we're seeing this baby boom. What are some projections we can make about how that's going to impact our country moving forward? Because that's quite literally what our representatives in the House and in the Senate think about when they gather the data provided by demographers, right? They're making decisions about resource allocation. There's sort of predictions about what businesses might be successful, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on based off this specific information here. So this is very relevant for your students to try to grasp. So that's in a nutshell, mysteries of the US pyramids. The final lesson that I wanted to share with you all today is appropriate for middle school. And there's a high school version of it called Family Counts. The version that I'm going to show you is the middle school version. It's called Everything Counts. And it essentially has your students creating their own census to gather either census information from their particular neighborhood or their particular class, or it can be completely made up. And then with that information, that's going to be sort of sample data. Students are going to put their sort of civics hat on and consider what that data tells them about some resources that their community might need as a result. So I'll explain the procedure and how that looks in a moment. Carrie, thank you. Appreciate you coming. So the Everything Counts lesson starts out with just a quick explainer of what the US Census is, or what the census is overall, especially for our middle school students that might not have grasped this information just yet or experienced this just yet in their particular classes. So just some info for you all. As I'm sure you all know, according to the Constitution, the US government must count everyone living in the United States every decade, every 10 years. So we just experienced one in 2020. Hopefully you all filled out your US Census. The census determines how many representatives each state has. So it's sort of relevant for your students to understand why this is significant. Why is this an important sort of piece of our government, of our sort of societal structure? Because our representatives use this information for various reasons, right? Congress uses the census data to make decisions about how much money different programs are going to receive. The list goes on. So what your students are going to get the chance to do is create their own census using the procedure in the lesson plan. So who can students count in their census. They can count the different students in their grade level or in their class. They can go outside during lunch and sort of survey students that are in the particular school that you work in. Or students can sample families in their neighborhood or on a specific block using their own survey, or they can use imaginary data if you don't want students to survey folks. Typically, privacy is something that folks might value, and so you might want to just have some imaginary data as well, and that's totally okay. So, what specific information are students going to be asking for? They're going to be asking folks for their names and their age, and that's really that's it. There's no other specific detail there. But just that information alone, your students can make some projections or predictions about what kind of resources might be helpful for their particular community. So there is an in-person worksheet that students can use to sort of conduct their own census. Students can also go conduct their census and then use that data in the virtual classroom or hybrid classroom. So I'll show you the hybrid version of the, or the virtual version of this lesson. So just check out the screen share here. This is sort of pre-filled out already. So I've done a sort of sample based on made up data of various people that I've surveyed. So the way that this spreadsheet works, and you can use this with your own students, is they'll enter a name that they surveyed, they'll plug in the age cohort, and then that information will automatically populate on the right-hand side here with this bar graph here, and that data is sort of represented there. This is something that we've sort of created on the back end through Google Sheets. Your students, if they're in person, will create their own bar graphs themselves. They can also create their own bar graphs through Google Sheets, but that might be a bit sort of complicated given those logistics. So to simplify it, we've created this version instead. So, for example, let's say John. just to show you all how this works. Let's say we surveyed John, and John is 10 to 14 years old. Let's say he's 11. So we'll click that, and boom, we just saw that pop up there. Just an example there. So once your students collect all this information, the next charge that they have, the next sort of task that we're giving them is in small groups. You all are city council members of your local town or your city, your county, or whatever the structure might be. And you all have some money in the budget to create a resource of some kind that's going to support your community. So based on the information that we have, what do we think might be a helpful resource, a building, a service that would support our fellow citizens? Well, I can maybe pose the question to you all if you'd be willing to humor me. Based on the data that we can see here, so we have some folks that are aged 30 to 40 years old in this community. We also have a larger number of folks that are aged 0 to 4, 5 to 9, and 10 to 14. What kind of building or maybe services might be helpful for this particular community here? What do you all think? Allison says, drop in a parents center. Yeah, absolutely. Looks like we have a lot of you. Patricia? A school? Yeah, absolutely. Definitely a school. And I think what's interesting about this lesson, we've actually done a rewrite of it most recently, just to bring in a little bit more of the we can call it maybe the justice or like equity component here. I think what's really interesting about this is, maybe there's some other information that students might want to gather before they make a decision that's going to impact the community, right? Maybe, if they're able to survey, like socioeconomic background, for example, maybe there's another resource that would that would support the community a bit more, right? The list goes on. There's so many different sort of indicators that you can find. Maybe family size or household size, maybe the list goes on. That might impact the decisions that your students are making. Students can also consider in sort of the discussion questions that we've included in the rewrite, based on the information that we have here, what assumptions are we making about our community, right? What stereotypes are we making about our community based on what we're seeing here, right? If the largest age cohort was, say, folks 65 to 69 or 45 to 49, right? What stereotypes are we making about folks based on age? Are we assuming that a certain population needs a certain service, right? Because maybe there's something else that might be more useful for folks. So that's sort of the nuance behind some of the civics conversations that this lesson can bring up. And we definitely encourage that for our classrooms here. So that's just a little bit about this particular lesson. Let me see if I missed anything here. All right. I'll pause here for a moment. Do folks have any questions about either this lesson or the previous lesson that I've shared? So this is appropriate for middle school, just FYI. And then the high school version of this lesson is called Family Counts. So everything counts. This one's the high school version is called Family Counts. It's going to be available on the 330 million kit that you all are going to receive as well. And that lesson has students looking at census data from different points in human history and pulling that data to make some analysis of the population in that particular time period. So it's interesting. It's less of students doing the actual census gathering themselves and more so looking at primary sources that already exist and making some determinations based off of that data. So more appropriate for sort of the high school version there for folks. All right, so it looks like we have a little bit of
I just wanted to mention or talk about, at least with the high school students, maybe even for middle school students also, but, in Massachusetts, we're having, a civics action project. So students are supposed to lead a project. And I think these would be great tools for students to conduct their own research. So maybe also for teachers to kind of think about what opportunities that students could actually use these types of resources to do their own research, because those Google Sheets are pretty impressive, and for students to be able to interact and engage in the research collection or gathering, I think is something that, we can kind of maybe get teachers to kind of think about what kinds of research activities that students can use, and then using these tools.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you saying that. And that actually reminds me, I wasn't planning on originally sharing this, but since we have a minute here, we have a student video contest called The World of 7 Billion. Let's see what the worldof7billion.org. And this is actually live right now. So it's relevant for middle school and high school students. And the challenge is that students can create a 60-second video. They can use their phones, they can use a tablet, they can use a computer, they can use an official camera, anything goes. But students are essentially creating a 60-second video highlighting a social or global issue, and the issue should be relevant to one of the contest topics. So we go to student video contest. The three topics are agriculture and food, urbanization, or ocean health. So it has this environmental theme. But essentially, students are going to be doing research and then presenting that information through sort of a PSA, public service announcement, within a 60-second video. If their video checks all the boxes and the rubric is available on the website, they have the chance to win one of 3 cash prizes. So there's a first place prize, a second place prize, honorable mention prize for high school and middle school. And then associated with the student video contest is our activism toolkit. I think this is great for what Gorman just mentioned. The activism toolkit is a great way for students to engage in a civics project. So there's this section here where students are provided with sort of age-appropriate content that'll teach them, or that they'll be able to learn about various issues through. So explore the issues. We have these different sections here. So students can download a PDF that'll give them some information on energy or women's related issues, or climate change, or water use, wildlife, agriculture, the list goes on. So I'll just click on the energy one, for example. And we've sort of compiled this information, and we have the sources listed here, but this gives students some background on this particular issue. And then if students want to get engaged and find ways to turn that information into action, there's this ready to take action section. And we have different suggestions for how students can sort of take action. So practice what you preach, make changes in your community, make changes in your school, fundraise for a cause, using media, social media, influencing lawmakers. Let's say we do the media one, for example. So your students can write a letter to an editor, and here's a sample letter of how they can do so. Just a little snippet about how students can effectively use social media, creating a YouTube channel, starting a podcast. So it's pretty built out. And this is great for civics classrooms in particular as well. And that's the worldof7billion.org website. We'll also make sure that we provide that to you all via email as well. Gorman, thank you for mentioning that, because it's helpful for folks to know. All right. So we have about 5 minutes here. So I want to make sure I'm providing you all with everything that we promised. So the first thing that I'm going to do is just mention the resources that we shared today. So we shared our world population video. We shared mysteries of the US pyramids, and we shared everything counts. I mentioned 2 other lessons. Power of the pyramids is sort of the global take on those population pyramids that we covered in the second lesson, mysteries of the US pyramids. And then everything counts, the high school version of that is called family counts. And that's going to be accessible through the access cards that I'm going to provide you all with in a moment here. But first, I would love to just drop an evaluation link in the chat. And this evaluation link is specifically for Pop Ed. So this is not the one that Gorman's also going to share with you all for the conference as a whole. Oh, it's already shared. Great. Thanks, Gorman. So I'll just evaluation and share that with you all. It's just a quick 5-minute evaluation. Would love for folks to fill that out for me. And then I'm going to share these links with you right now. So there's 3 links. The first is for our teaching population K through 12 best of curriculum. So you all have free access to this. You're just going to go to this URL link, and then it'll take you to a landing page. You're going to put in your name. You have the option of also including your email, but it's not mandatory. And then you all will receive a free sort of PDF pop-up that'll allow you to download the lesson plan. Or sorry, download the curriculum access card. And that's going to give you access to 60 lesson plans, including the ones that you just saw today. So it's a great resource for you all. We're also going to give you access to the 330 million kit. So that's the second link that you see there. And that's going to be 14 lessons that has the Mystery of the US Pyramids lesson on it. And that's also free and available to download. All you got to do is just put in your name. You give us an email to email to you, and you'll have access to that. Popping that in the chat. And then the final link that I want to share with you all is our digital tools link. So all of the lessons that we were able to convert to the virtual platform are going to be available on a Google Drive. You all you have to do is just go to that Google Drive link. You can make a copy of it to your personal Google Drive, and then you'll have access to it indefinitely. So that's the spreadsheet, the pyramid sheet that I shared with you all. That's all accessible through the Google Drive as well. This will also be available to you all via email. I trust that folks were able to register ahead of time. I know Patricia did. I know Carrie did before she left. Allison, were you able to RSVP for this particular session ahead of time? I have your email already. Is that correct? Cool. All right, fantastic. Well, with that, I will turn things back over to Gorman to send us off. And I appreciate you all for being here during the live session. And then if folks are watching the recording, thank you for checking us out. I hope there was something that you saw today that was useful for you all. So Gorman, I'll pass it back over to you. Thank you so much for having population education at the conference this year. And we hope to be back next year, whether we're virtual again or in person. I feel like I can't say at this point, but whatever it is, we'll roll with the punches, and we'll be happy to be here again.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Raphael. This is great resources. Yeah, this is recorded. So, you know, I'll be posting this, and I'll share the link back to you, and I'll share the link to those who weren't able to make it today. Yeah, and then if you take the our survey that I linked on the chat, when you complete that survey, that will take you to your certificate of completion for this workshop. So you may use that. You can print it, download it, and have it for your records. But yeah, I hope to see you again next year, maybe in person, hopefully. We'll see. But thank you. It was a great presentation. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for those who are able to make it. And all right. Great. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Go Sox.
Thanks so much. Bye.
All right. Bye.